Hello and welcome to ChinnyVision. This time we're going to meet Headus Malthian and Footus Undium. Yes, if you've read the instructions to Head Over Heels, you'll know who I mean. That's the full names of Head and Heels, who are the stars of this 1986 isometric game by Ocean, programmed by John Rittman and the graphics by Bernie Drummond. Ported to many systems. I'm going to start off here on the original system, the Sinclair Spectrum. You'll recognise the style of menu screen here, and indeed the game. It's the same engine as the earlier Batman game, also by John Rittman and Bernie Drummond. In fact, I think it was only about 9 months earlier that game came out. So, you are two dogs, in effect. You are spies, and you've been sent to this prison planet, and you've got to meet up again and travel to all the other planets to liberate them. So they can go. There you go. You see Head and Heels on the same screen, and you can. They start off split, but you can swap between them at any time. The game is this forced perspective isometric style that will be so familiar to 8-bit gamers at this time. May look slightly odd to modern gamers. I don't know if the isometric style is. Do people still make isometric games? I guess they do, actually. And the bunny rabbits there give you an extra life, so that's an easy extra life there on the start screen. Oddly, Head starts with 9 lives and Heel starts with 8 lives. First thing you've got to do is collect the things that are going to make your mission easier. In the case of Head, you've got to collect some donuts and a big hooter, and when you've got those, you can fire donuts as missiles to stun enemies. You can't. Those things on the screen there are toasters, and if you touch those, you die. So there you go. We're gonna. If we activate the switch on this screen, then we can go and collect those donuts over there. Got to be quite careful on Head Over Heels, because sometimes little platforms like these can disintegrate from beneath you, but not on this screen. But it always pays to be quick when landing on platforms. I'm going to quickly cross over to the Amstrad CPC version just to see what that looks like. There's so many different versions of this. Rather than do them one after the other, we're going to look at them all, and then we're going to flip between them as we look at the gameplay. The Amstrad CPC version is essentially an improved version of the Sinclair Spectrum version. It's also ported by John Rittman, so it is an authentic product. The door designs are slightly different on the CPC version, but the gameplay is exactly the same. And one thing I'm showing on this version is what it looks like on an Amstrad CTM monitor. So this is actually now a video screenshot of what it looks like on the monitor. And as you can see there, we cross over onto that screen there and zoom in so you see what it looks like again close up on a monitor. Jump over the toaster things there. And lovely graphics, absolutely lovely graphics. Really benefits from being on a CRT if you've got one, but still beautifully detailed on a emulator, or as you can see, as we usually run from RGB direct out of the original machine. This is where you collect the horn from. So I'm crossing over to the MSX version, which is sensibly the same as the Spectrum version. I'm going to collect the horn, and these platforms disappear. So there you go. Going to be tying this absolutely perfectly. There you go. I've got the horn. I'm going to jump back onto the... Again, that disappears, and back onto the bit there. All the Z80 ports are very similar. The Amstrad is the most colourful. I've got to watch these little baddies here, because it's happened again. They move around at random, and yeah. Over to the C64, which is a 6502 port. This isn't programmed by John Rittman. It's a line-by-line conversion of the Z80 version. Different music, as you can see here. And don't worry, if you think I'm skipping over these quickly, we're going to come back to them. There are so many different versions of Head Over Heels. The graphics on the C64 version are the same as the Spectrum version, entirely monochrome, and using one of the higher resolutions on the C64. Now, I'm using the same joystick on all these versions. I'm having a little bit of difficulty here just timing this. So, again, it's one of those little differences between the Z80 versions and the 6502. Just slight timing differences there. Jump over the teleport. It's a little bit slow here on the C64. It certainly seems slow after the Spectrum version. But the graphics are beautifully detailed. They've not tried to do a lower resolution version with lots of different colours. It is an authentic port of the Z80 version, although as we come to see, there are differences with the 6502 version here, and we'll see that later on. And yeah, those tunes between the screens do get on your nerves. Over to the Atari 8-bits, and this is going to be a port of the C64 version, which is in turn a port of the Spectrum version. 2 colour screens here on the Atari. Don't know why they didn't keep the background black. It would have looked a bit tidier. I'm not sure I like this deep blue, or these coloured backgrounds here on the Atari. There's no reason for it. I guess someone thought it looked nicer, but I think it would look better if it was just plain black. And the thing you're noticing, again, they're very similar between all these versions, which is why I'm going straight through them. Just go back to the plot of the game. We're on the prison planet at the moment. We've got to meet up head and heels, and when you meet them up, you can join them up, and you've got both their different abilities. Heels goes fast, but can't jump very high. Head can jump very high, but can't go very fast. Over to the ST version, and this is a port of the C64 version again, and it's a line-by-line conversion from the 6502, so we're getting further removed from the original Z80 versions here. Why they didn't just convert it from the Z80 version, well, I know, because it's the same guy who did the conversion. So the 68,000 processor versions on the ST and Amiga seem to have picked up the traits of the C64 version. Whereas I'm doing this little jump here no problem on the Spectrum, Amstrad and MSX, there are slight differences in this port. Even though it's done line by line by hand, there are very minor differences. I'm sorry, this is getting a bit repetitive, but we'll move on very shortly. So I think we've seen enough of Head now. Let's cross over to see what Heels does at the start of the game. And here we go, over to the Amstrad version. Different colours for every screen, makes it look very colourful, all down the Amstrad's 4-colour mode. Heels rather, can jump, well, he can't jump very high, but he can move very fast. Those little fish things there allow you a restart point in the game, so if you lose all your lives, you can go back here. And this little Dalek thing, with a Prince Charles head, you use the thing there, and you run against it, and you move the little Dalek thing around. I've got to get the purse, and once you've got the purse, you can pick things up. And that's Heels' special ability. With Head, you've got to get the donuts and the horn, and then you can fire. With Heels, you can get the purse, and then when you join them together, you get the ability to carry things and fire at things. The fire button on the joystick makes you jump, so the firing ability of the donuts and the purse are on the keyboard controls. Right, so in here, so now I should be able to pick up that drum. Right, there we go. And over to the MSX, so you can see the difference. So we picked up the drum, we jump up, and we drop the drum, and we can go through the door. Now this bounty here will follow you around, but he does it in a linear fashion, so it's easy to fool him. You just need to get him at a sufficient distance, then use Heads, or Heels, sorry, I get confused between the two, ability to run fast. And you see, I can make him, by going back and forth, he can't gain any ground on me. Back on the Spectrum, same screen, again doing the same thing, jump up there, and Heels can't jump very high at all. And we're up on these little lifts, and they're beautifully animated with different sound effects as you go up there. You get these larger screens, although when you get to a certain point, they scale down. And same on the Atari 8-bit here. When you reach a certain point, it reduces the screen size. Not sure why it does that. It'd be nice to have the larger screens, actually. It can on some of the bigger puzzle screens later on in the game, it can get quite annoying when you're on the edge and you get that slight pause. So through that door there, I go. You can see head is there above there because I've left him there. But what we're going to get both of them to is the marketplace, and then we can join them together. So I'm started off again as head again. Left heels in the corridor down there. Over the Amiga, and a little bit later on with head. Again, another restart point there. So I got that, and that little block there I jumped on disappeared. You can see where the floors are lethal, where they've got these little spikes on them, as you can see. Now I should drop down, and now I'm now in the marketplace there, and that's where we're going to meet head and heels up. So back on, still on the Amiga version. These little head things there, I've just pushed with the ball. Interestingly, on the 16-bit version, if you press objects against them, you can move them. On the 8-bit versions, you can't. So we're going to drop down there. Now here's one of the first more difficult puzzles in the game. You've got a random thing running around on this screen, and you've got to make a set of steps out of all these blocks. And we're on the MSX doing it. You can see how similar these... You can see why I'm fitting between them, because all these versions are so similar. It's fair to say there is not a duff version of Head Over Heels. There is certainly a version to play over the others, which we'll come to, but if you've got any of these systems, the Amstrad Spectrum, Commodore, Atari 8-bit, MSX, or the Amstrad PCW, which we can't show because this is all original hardware, and I don't have a PCW, nor do I want one, although they're fascinating machines. The PCW has a beautiful port of this as well, and it actually gets some of the larger screens, because of the PCW's resolution, onto even some of the screens that are 2 screens on these versions. Actually, you can get 3 play areas onto the screen because the PCW's increased resolution over the other computers. Right, we've done that, jumped up there and through here. You see the head there can't be moved when you push things against it, but as on the 16-bit versions you can. Right, head and heels have now met up, so heels is going to pick up that object there. You can swap between them at any time. I'm going to drop that object. Now I'm going to join them up. Right, join them up. Swap between them. Oh no, you've got to get them precisely lined up. Right, takes a bit of getting this right. Right, now hit the swap key. No. No. Still not done. Come on. It's got to work after all this time. Come on. There we go. Right, head and heels are finally mixed up, and you get the speed and the jumping ability. And then you've got to separate them again. The game keeps on doing this to you. Just as you think, yeah, I've got them together, the game will force you to separate them. So over to the C64. Right, so I've got to separate them out and use one of them. I've got to get the robot over here, and then I'm going to ride the other one over to the other side and then use them to get him over. Right, so he's going to ride on... Heels is going to ride on the robot. Swap the head. Let's steer him over. It is noticeable how much slower the C64 version is, and it gets even slower when there's a lot going on the screen as well. The Spectrum and Amstrad versions do suffer from the MSX version as well, actually, do suffer from a bit of slowdown. The C64 version is noticeably slower. Right, got heels over there. Right, get him off. Jump up there. Steer the Dalek / Prince Charles head back over. And it's so slow. I'm playing with a cheat on the C64 version here as well, and to declare this on the Amiga and CPC versions, but none of the other versions, because I wanted to get further into the game, and it takes about 20 minutes to get head and heels to the marketplace alone. You can watch these playthroughs online with these people who are really good at it, and they can do it a little bit quicker, but yeah, it's about 20 minutes to get as far as the marketplace. So Head Over Heels has had more gameplay footage recorded for it than any other game I've done. I think it's about 87 gigabytes of video, which is absurd in 8-bit terms. 87 gigabytes. You had no idea You had no idea what 87 megabytes was when you were playing this game in 1986, let alone 87 gigabytes. Right, so join them back up. Turn head round. Oh, just got to get them lined up precisely. Right. And there we go. Done. And now I can't jump up. If you're not quite lined up with the doors, the game lines you up with them anyway. Right there. And you've got to separate them again. Because that little tunnel there, the thing it's made up of, are lethal. There's lots of puzzles in the game that you have to learn by trial and error. You're not... You watch the playthroughs online and think, oh, that looks easy. And these people have memorised this stuff over years and years and years. And to be honest, are probably rewinding and being able to go to save states and things like that. I don't think... It's 300 screens in this game. And we're on the marketplace screen, so on the prison planet at the moment. There'll be teleports to Penitentiary, Safari, Bookworld, and Egyptus. And then we've got to defeat the Emperor to prevent further planets falling under his rule. You'll notice I'm not commenting too much on the plot of the game, and well, the reason is John Rittman basically admits that he wrote the game and then he invented the plot afterwards. Right, there's the teleport. All 4 teleports do the same thing. And through we go, still on the C64. Lovely high-res screen. I really admire how they've actually stuck with the high-res thing on the C64. Now that little stairway disappears. Now I've only just learnt that those stairways made up of dogs actually only disappear if Head enters the room. If Heels enters the room on his own, the stairway stays there. Right, so down here. And this is one of the screens where there's differences between the Z80 versions and the other versions. Note there were 2 robots on this screen, and note the layout of the little lethal bits in the middle of the screen there. So we fired it onto him, and these robots on this screen remind me of something. I don't know what. I mean, I know they're half Dalek. The top half reminds me of something. A little bit of slowdown because we've got 2 baddies on the screen here on the CPC, but not too bad. I'm just going to show this screen again on the C64 and Amiga. And as you can see, when it's been ported to the C64, they've cut down the amount of baddies and things on the screen, perhaps for speed reasons, I don't know. But when they've come to port it to the 68,000 systems, the ST and Amiga, they've kept those restrictions from the C64, and this is repeated throughout the game. It's a shame that the 16-bit versions didn't get a port of the CPC version, which is the slightly improved version of the original Spectrum version, because they would have had all the benefits that the CPC version had and all the additional graphics and speed of the 16-bits. It would have been really good. And there's just a few screens scattered throughout the game on the 16-bit versions that are cut down, not for any technical reason for the 16-bit, but because the C64 version had those screens cut down. One of these things about isometric games is it can sometimes be a little bit confusing in terms of height, because Head and Heels have no shadow. So you can't always judge if something's higher up than it is, if you see what I mean. It's one of those restrictions of the game that sometimes you look at screens and go, where's that door? Is that door high up, or is it behind something? Or, you know, it's very difficult to tell. Over on the Amiga version. And again, this is a beautiful screen. Look at this. It's difficult to tell from this where things are. Now you can see. Now Head rather is underneath it, and you can work the puzzle out. When you first look at the screen, it's a bit like a Isha picture. Is Isha or Isha? Where you look at it and go, okay, right, how does that work? There's that little thing there trying to home in on me, and this is one of those things where we're going to end up on a big screen. There we go. Oh, no, and he homed in on me. A little bit more colour on the 16-bit version, so things stand out more, because I didn't see him, for a start, coming towards me. Oh, he's persistent. He's persistent. It says so much that this game was ported a couple of years later to the 16 bits, because somebody at Ocean must have felt this was an incredibly strong game, and admittedly they only put it on budget on the 16 bits, but even so, this came, I think it was Amiga Power's 24th best game of all time in one of their polls. All the other magazines absolutely loved the game. The game scored massive ratings when it was originally reviewed on all formats, and also in lots of the best of games of all time charts, including yours, Sinclair, and as I say, Amiga Power, and I think Amstrad Action rated it very highly as well in one of their charts. And this is Safari World, by the way, or Safari Planet. The game doesn't tell you which planet you're on, although there's a penitentiary start on Safari, Book World and Egyptus, and then the Emperor's Own Planet. You can't necessarily tell which planet you're on. And we're on the Spectrum version here, and this is the puzzle in the Crown Room. And I don't think I mentioned this so far, and we're, 20 or so minutes into this review. Each planet, you've got to collect a crown. And that's the crown for Safari World. And you've got to work out this puzzle. So that's what we're going to do on each planet. And as I say, there's 300 screens. There's actually a kind of a follow-up for Head Over Heels. And it's called Monster Max for the Game Boy. And it was only released on that system. And it's very, very similar to Head Over Heels. And that came out, as I say, in 1994. And wasn't a very big hit. I think that cartridge is quite difficult to come by. So that's been a bit of a flying overview of Head Over Heels. I've skipped around some of the different systems. But I've got to different stages in the game, in the different systems, because it is such a big game. This game is absolutely massive. Some of these versions I've been playing for about an hour to get as far as I have, especially on the Spectrum, so that's the reason it's been a little bit all over the place. But to run through the versions, well, we'll start off with the original Spectrum version, which is the original and the fastest and probably the best, although the CPC version is also very, very good, arguably far more polished than the Spectrum version, because John Rittman put in a few little extra things into the Amstrad version, such as the different doorways. And I do like the colour scheme. It's certainly the best looking of all the 8-bit versions. The MSX version, which is the other Z80 version that we looked at, very competent port, monochrome, but it plays very well and doesn't have the usual slowdown you sometimes get with Spectrum ports onto the MSX. We haven't shown it because I can't find it on original hardware, but an honourable mention to the Amstrad PCW version, which is incredibly impressive for a machine that is basically only designed for word processing and serious software. Over to the 6502 versions, the C64 version is a little bit cut down and it's a little bit slower, but it still plays fantastically well. The Atari 8-bit version is very nice. I have to question why it's not a black background all the way through, but it plays very well. Some little tunes are between the screens, which always play, are a little bit odd and slightly tuneless. They sound out of tune, I don't know why. Over to the 16-bit versions, and the ST and Amiga versions are near identical. Their problem, along with the Atari version, is that they've been ported from the C64 version. And that's a bit of a mistake. They should have gone back to the Z80 code. But these are minor niggles. Head Over Heels is the ultimate isometric game. It vastly improves on anything the aforementioned Ultimate did. It's incredibly playable, fantastic graphics, wonderful to explore. A game so full of character, it is bursting out the screen at you. Whatever system you've got a fantastic port of this. But if you're going to go out and seek a version, then do seek out either the original Spectrum version or that slightly improved Amstrad version. Because this is not just one of the best isometric computer games of all time, it's arguably one of the best computer games of all time. Anybody looking to program a computer game should be shown Head Over Heels for some of the best puzzles, some of the best graphics despite the limitations, and some of the best character in any computer game ever. Goodness me, this game is so good that 30 years on it impresses me as much today as it did in 1986. A brilliant, wonderful, fantastic game.